How much stuff do you write that you start writing and then you just find, actually, I don't want to pursue this anymore, or you just put it to the side for a while?
Many things.
I mean, it's a world that I can't. I mean, I do a bit of writing myself, but you sound really prolific in terms of reading and writing and just consuming media. And
Well, why don't you? I mean, I just can't. Yeah, it's all of my life, isn't it? I kind of can't help myself. I just want to kind of consume as much as possible.
That's amazing, though, isn't it? I think it
Do you
sounds like
not
you're
wanna
following
do
your
that?
passion. Sometimes, but I get quite sick of it after a while. I have to. You sound surprised. I don't know. Yeah, sometimes, but I feel like I struggle sometimes with like addictive kind of nature of things. So I try to not do too much of things. It feels like it damages my mental health
If you throw yourself too far down the rabbit hole of...
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I do lots of varied things instead, and then I forget about them after a while if I get a little bit bored of them, and just come back to them in like a year or 6 months or whatever.
But you've been doing quite a lot of writing recently.
I've written some children's books recently.
Yes, you have.
Have you seen it?
You showed me.
Did I show you the whole thing, or just the...
I think just the...
I'll have to give you a copy sometime.
Yes, that would be amazing.
I mean, it's aimed at a child, so I don't know if you'd enjoy it that much. But no, I've written like 3 or 4 children's books now, and they're all rhyming, sort of like Dr. Seuss or Julia Donaldson, kind of that sort of rhythmic. I don't know what you'd call them. The sort of 4...
Yeah, how do you...
A, B, I guess.
How do you get yourself into the kind of zone for that?
Well, that's something I actually genuinely enjoy, because it's not just like... I suppose writing a story has its own challenges, but I partly enjoy that because the rhyming nature of things means you not only have to tell the story, but it's also a puzzle that you're trying to work out how you can get the words in the right order, so you got the rhyming word at the end of each line, and it sort of was like, oh no, and you scribble things out and you think that doesn't flow very well, and it kind of... I used to rap when I was a bit younger. So it's sort of like that as well, getting the rhythm and the flow feeling right. And I try to do it all from feeling, at least with the first draft, which is what I find fun, enjoyable.
And then there's the later draft.
The later drafts, then you start tearing it apart because you think it doesn't flow as well as you thought it did when you first wrote it or whatever. But you end up rereading the first bit over and over again up to the next bit, and then you write a couple more verses and you reread the whole thing again and write a couple more, to always try to feel like you understand the overall flow of it, if that makes sense.
That does make sense.
But I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I've never had any kind of formal... I mean, other than school, we had a anthology of poems which we had to make notes in. Did you probably have the same thing?
Yeah.
But my anthology of poetry, like I looked over my neighbours and there's like maybe 2 notes on it, and I used to fill the entire page left and right with little scribbles of what this means and how it connects to the next verse, and just all that sort of stuff. So I guess I have a bit of a passion for it, but then I sort of start doubting myself maybe at some point, and I think, actually, this isn't as good as I thought it was. I leave it for a while, come back to it in a couple of months' time, I read it again, I think, actually, it's better than I thought it was. So I have these little internal battles all the time. I think probably most creatives probably suffer from that at some point.
I was going to say, is that not the pendulum swing of creativity of like, I am amazing, I am dreadful, I am amazing, I am dreadful.
I guess so. But how do you ever cure that? I mean, we watched...
I don't think you ever cure that.
Well, my wife and I watched the Lewis Capaldi documentary. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
I haven't seen it.
But he struggles a lot with his mental health, and he realised that he's got Tourette's, and he has this twitch that when he gets tired or anxious, he starts twitching, and it's caused him sort of back problems and shoulder problems and stuff. What was the point I was making? Yeah, he's like, sold millions and millions of records since he first came out, and then I think he's got like billions of streams on Spotify or something. So he's, a good songwriter from that perspective. But in this documentary, he says he actually doubts himself more now than he ever did before. It's like he's got this expectation now that he needs to match or exceed, and if he doesn't, he's not worthy or something.
It's a bit like that all the time, isn't it? Even if you're learning, the more you learn, the more you like become an expert in an area, the more you realise you don't know about everything.
Yeah. It's like that Dunning-Kruger. Have you seen the Dunning-Kruger curve thing? Have you seen that?
I do know what you mean.
Where you're most confident before you know anything.
Yes.
Which so many of the students I teach are like that in their first year. They sort of think they're everything, it's easy, blah, blah, blah. and then you start learning stuff, and your confidence drops quite dramatically until you're at the bottom when you realise how big this subject is and you know very little of it, and then you slowly, gradually start coming up. But I don't reckon you ever reach the confidence you were at before you started learning the thing.
No, I don't think
Or when
you
you
do.
just, I think it's just as you start learning the thing. It's like just after you start learning the thing, isn't it? You're like, this is easy, I can do this.
And then there is this huge well of knowledge
Yeah.
and information.
Yeah. Did you ever play Command and Conquer?
I did not.
I didn't. But do you know the gist of it? It's
I-
like
yeah.
soldiers on a map, but you start in this little circle that you can only see a little portion of the map, and as you explore, probably a lot of games use the same principle, and it uncovers the map. I think of learning like that. You start as those soldiers, you're like, this is the whole world, it's easy. And then you unveil, and then you meet enemies, and they're like, ah! And you're like, ah! Go back to the original map, but it's too late. You've uncovered the map.
Yeah,
You can't go
there is no
back.
return.
Yeah, it's like that. I think learning.
I think actually that's a really fun metaphor for that.
you
Yeah, I don't think, and I feel like you never fully, because you want something to be good. Yeah, like you can never judge what people are going to think. It's so subjective. You've no idea really how that's going to speak to other people.
Yeah. And I mean, I gave them as gifts to friends. So we got one book printed, which is called "There's Something in My Shoe," and it turns out the thing is, this is the one I showed you,
Yes,
wasn't it?
it
Yeah.
is.
The thing is like a little creature that somehow jumps into people's shoes. Because how do you ever get a thing in your shoe unless it jumps in there? It makes no sense how anything gets in your shoe.
I mean, it's true.
So I gave it as a gift to a lot of friends for Christmas, and like some friends said, "Oh, it's great, amazing, blah blah blah." But then it's almost like damaging if people received it and just said thanks and didn't really say anything about it. You think it really plays on your mind as a creative. Every little ounce of feedback is just, I don't know. And then I obviously got one good video, really good video actually, from my wife's colleague has got a daughter who's about 7 who read it and sent me back a video saying how much she loved it, and
Aw.
she said, how many stars would you give it out of 5? And she said 11 or something like that. And that was almost all the motivation I need to just keep going, because it might just be that her and people like her, that's my target audience, and the other people I gave it to, don't appreciate that that's the target audience, or maybe their kids are too young or too old or whatever. But yeah, it's hard. I find being a creative a struggle at times. Do you ever?
Yes.
But your passion sort of drives you through it.
I just can't not make up stories. That's a really weird thing. And I feel like that's the one thing I find so strange. Often when I talk to students, they're like, I can't come up with an idea. I'm like, coming up with the idea is not the hard part.
Yeah,
Like,
you're in big trouble.
just like, oh gosh, like ideas are not, I have this joke with a lot of our colleagues because we come up with stories and potentials of like, oh, there's a short in that, or there's a so-and-so in that, pretty much at least twice a day.
Right, wow.
Right? There's always something, a pattern to be found, a narrative to be made. The hard work is actually putting in the like, now I need to structure this. I've got a concept. How do I put it together? Who is the most interesting character to have at the center of this story? What might their motivation be? What's then the extrapolation of the world? What's then, all that kind of stuff is that then that's when it starts to become the hard work.